Are we ready to start?
Bante, I just have to start the YouTube somehow. Hold on one moment. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how to do that. It seems to be working. Okay, so I
Seems to
guess we're
be.
all
Or
set.
yeah, I see from this. I see that it's going on YouTube. Okay, so I think we are ready to take questions.
Okay, Bante, good afternoon. We have just two questions from group one. The first was in the comprehension of groups, the breakdown by 11. What is the meaning of the inferior superior distinction?
It's actually not fresh in my mind offhand, but one finds that those distinctions made. There's a book in the Abhidhamma Pitaka called the Vibhanga. Let me just quickly get it, and I can. What is the second question while I'm searching for this?
Okay, the second question is just a reiteration of the request for a discussion of emptiness within these teachings at whatever time you find appropriate.
Yeah, as I said last night, somebody asked about emptiness, and emptiness is going to come, the application of emptiness, as we are getting further along the path. Okay, I see here, I just opened up the Vibhanga to find the explanation in the case of rupa form, what is meant by inferior and what is meant by superior. So the form of these beings and those beings who are unyatang, I don't know. Avanyatang is like despised, helitang, ridiculed, paributang, reviled, achitakatang, not respected, who are low, considered low, who are considered undesirable, unloved, disagreeable. Their form, sounds, odors, tastes, tactiles, this is considered form that is low. Then the form of these or those beings who are esteemed, not despised, not ridiculed, not reviled, who are respected, who are considered excellent, who are regarded as excellent, who are taken to be, which is taken to be desired, lovely, agreeable, their form, sounds, odors, tastes, and so on. This is called form that is excellent. So that's just the definition in the Vibhanga. And similar applies to in the case of feeling, okay, unwholesome feeling is the feeling in unwholesome states of consciousness is low or inferior. In wholesome and indeterminate feeling is superior. Or then wholesome and unwholesome feeling is inferior. Indeterminate feeling is superior. So it uses different kinds of classification like that.
Okay.
Yeah, one doesn't have to be tied down to maybe these fixed definitions that come, but one could even apply one's own standards to consider what is inferior and what is superior.
That's helpful. Thank you very much, Bante.
Okay, so the next.
Bante, if we have one question from room 2, which was about the quality of Nama-rupa and rebirth. And the question was about, I guess, which or how many beings have Nama-rupa? It seems like perhaps some don't have both Nama and Rupa.
No.
But what is the sort of domain of Nama-rupa? I guess the question of sentience sort of came up and try to understand how that all works.
Now, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but what I could say is that Okay, Nama-rupa, having both material and mental phenomena, is certainly its characteristic with all the types of beings that we're familiar with, human beings and animals. Okay, now it's said that Nama-rupa extends throughout the Deva world, except in the arupa planes, the formless planes of existence. There is Nama, that is the mental phenomena, consciousness, together with feeling, perception, and volitional activities, but no rupa, no material form. That's why it's called the arupa, planes of existence. And then there's a plane of existence in the form realm called the asanya satta. These are the non-percipient beings, and these beings have rupa, but not nama. They have material bodies, but no mental processes, no mental activities. So it said to reach the formless realms of existence, a human being would develop and master one or another of the formless meditative attainments, the non-material meditative attainments, the base of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And then the power of that meditative attainment becomes the karmic cause for rebirth into the formless sphere of existence. In the case of the asanya the non-percipient beings, it would have to be a human being develops a particular meditative attainment, which becomes the condition for rebirth into the realm of non-percipient beings. And so when the person is reborn into that realm, the stream of consciousness stops. And so there's no consciousness, no feeling, no perception or volitional activities during the lifespan in that realm. But it doesn't mean that the stream of consciousness is permanently cut off, because the karma that leads to rebirth into that realm has a certain duration. And when that karmic force comes to an end, then the being passes away, and then the stream of consciousness arises again. For example, if they're to be reborn back into the human realm, then of course the stream of consciousness from the last human birth then connects with the rebirth consciousness of the new human birth. And so the stream of consciousness continues.
Okay, thank you. But in terms of our everyday objects, for instance, trees and mountains, would those be said to possess Nama-rupa in any way?
Certainly not mountains. And in the case of plants, sort of the official Buddhist position is that plants don't have anything that corresponds to consciousness. And though there are some experiments that have been done that show that plants do seem to have some kind of sentience, but it would not be the full sentience of a conscious being.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. Otherwise, a person, a Buddhist, could not keep the precepts and be a farmer, because in taking a plant life, one would then be destroying, taking the life of living beings. Okay.
Hello, Bhante. We have two questions from breakout room 3.
Yeah.
And the first relates to the abolition of conceit.
Yeah.
So with pride and conceit prevalent among all practitioners, and also subtle, how can we deal with the corruption of pride and conceit during our practice?
Okay, conceit is only really fully eliminated, it said, with the attainment of the stage of arhatship, but one can help to reduce the tendency to conceit I would say even without deep insight, but one could do just the kind of daily reflective contemplation, going through the 5 aggregates, taking each one and then reflecting, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And so if one does this regularly and repeatedly, then it helps to diminish, to weaken the tendency to grasp upon any of one's features, whether bodily features like beauty, strength, and health, or one's innate capacities like intelligence, or particular skills, or particular achievements in one's social and active life. So it helps to counter the tendency to grasp upon these as a basis for conceit. So just one repetitively develops that reflection. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Okay, and you said 2 questions?
Thank you. Yes, there's the second one relates to paragraph 96. There is no heap or store of unrisen mentality, materiality existing prior to its arising. So the question is, if there is no heap, where are the fetters or defilements stored?
That's a good question. Yeah, there's a rather detailed discussion of that question later in the Path of Purification. I think it's in could be chapter 22. And basically what it maintains is that the defilements are not stored in any place, but they remain until they're finally cut off and eliminated by the attainment of the appropriate stage of the path. There remain the opportunity for those defilements to arise. I'm not sure that really addresses the issue in a satisfactory way. So maybe this is a kind of problem with this idea that there's no place where things are stored. And so some Buddhist schools, this is the Yogacara school, developed the idea of the storehouse consciousness, the alaya vijnana, in which the seeds of the defilements remain as perpetual, ongoing tendencies, which are actually sort of stored up and preserved in the store consciousness. And then when one meets with suitable conditions in one's personal life, that activates the seeds of the defilements to become active. But that was a unique position of the Yogacara school, but the other Buddha schools rejected the idea of a store consciousness and held just that those defilements do not exist in storage in some place, but until they are eradicated by the path, there will be the tendency for those defilements to arise under the corresponding conditions.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, then the next, was there other groups?
Yes, group 4. And we have 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, the first one is about is that the fixed stage. So the question is that whether one or more of the stage of purification or insight knowledge, some stage can be omitted or partially fulfilled, and the practitioner still can go into the stream entry.
I would have to answer to that, yes. That I would say that this system of the stages it's a system which appeared with the development and the elaboration of the process of spiritual development maybe over a couple of centuries. So we don't find all of these stages listed as such. Well, actually, we do find the 9 stage. We do find the 7 stages in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 24, and 9 stages mentioned in that sutta in the Digha Nikaya. But elsewhere, we don't find them mentioned in the Sutta Pitaka. And so it seems to be an elaboration of the experiences that a practitioner goes through. And I don't think every practitioner necessarily has to go through all of those stages. In fact, we read sometimes of practitioners who start a practice in the morning and then they reach attainment that same day in the afternoon. And even we read some accounts of practitioners who have never met the Buddha before. They hear the Buddha give a discourse, and while they're listening to the discourse, they attain stream entry. And so you don't see them going through each of these particular stages one by one, but it seems that maybe because their faculties are very sharp, so they could go very quickly to attainment without going through all the stages. But certainly the basic, let's say the basic 3 stages of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya seems to be quite essential. The more detailed stages that we've been taking in the Visuddhimagga system are really differentiations through which one passes in the development of Panya or wisdom. And I would say that some practitioners can go through the sharpness of the wisdom, very quickly without passing through those individual stages.
Thank you, Bande. So the second question is about equanimity. So we know that this is one of the 10 imperfections. So the question is that understanding that Arahant have already irritated all the defilements. So how would an Arahant also check that, make sure his equanimity is without attachment?
If the person is truly an Arhat, then there won't be any attachment. So there's no need for the Arhat to check to see that his equanimity is without attachment. If a person thinks they're an Arhat and then they have equanimity, and then they find that they have even a subtle attachment to that equanimity, that is ipso facto proof that they're not a real Arhat.
Okay. So the last question is that one participant asked, Bande, could you please kindly elaborate on the knowledge of rise and falls in reference to the earlier comment you said, flashing into non-existence?
Not quite sure that I understand the question. Say again.
One participant asked, can you elaborate on your earlier comments of flashing into non-existence?
Okay, maybe that question is going to be answered when we come to the later insight knowledges, particularly the knowledge of, it's called Bhanga-jnana, the knowledge of destruction or dissolution. So let's just hold that question off till we come to that knowledge.
Thank you, Bande. That's all.
Okay.
Bande, room number 5.
Yeah.
We have 3 questions.
Okay.
The first question is about meditation.
Yeah.
Do you have to go through all the steps or pick up from the last step from previous meditation?
I'm not quite sure that I understand the question. Picking up from the last step?
I am unmuting Kenneth. Can you repeat your question? Just in case I...
Sure, Johnny, thank you. Bhante, the question I was asking was, we have the, in the path of purification, we have 7. It's, it's highly unlikely one person could get through all the steps in one sitting. So gotten through, say, like step 3 or step 4, the next
Yeah.
they sit for a meditation, do they need
Yeah.
to go through all the steps, or can they pick up from step 4 and move forward? Like, it's a practical question.
Maybe in terms of the insight knowledges, say if one has reached a more advanced stage of insight knowledge, and then one has ended one's sitting session, maybe because it's lunchtime has come, and then in the afternoon one resumes the practice. Usually one would begin quickly going through the preceding stages that one has gone through. So one could go through them in 2 or 3 minutes and then come to the stage where one left off, the more advanced stage where one left off.
Sure, Bhante.
One doesn't have to struggle with them over a long time. One just goes quickly through them just in a couple of minutes, and then comes to the place where one left off.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante, question number 2 actually is so similar to something you just answered. Is how to prevent the 10th imperfection cause corruption.
It's again?
How to prevent the 10th imperfection, I think it's conceit, cause corruption to previous attainment, previous cause corruption to others, whatever the meditator already achieved.
Yeah, I thought the instructions were very clear from the Visuddhimagga itself, that what turns the other phenomena into corruptions is the attachment that underlies them. And then because of that attachment, when those wonderful phenomena become manifest, one drops the contemplation of the 3 characteristics or of the conditioned nature of those phenomena, and one just becomes attached to those phenomena and indulges in the enjoyment of them. So the way to avoid that from happening is to recognize that these are just conditioned phenomena that have appeared because of the strength of my contemplation. And then one contemplates those phenomena as being not mine, not I, not myself, or as being impermanent, dukkha, non-self, or as being conditioned, dependently originated, subject to dissolution, destruction, falling away. And in that way, one sort of doesn't indulge in the enjoyment of those phenomena, but one proceeds on the straight course of contemplating mental and material phenomena with insight. Does that answer the question?
The last question is how to handle, how would a meditator handle when the meditator see the illumination?
I thought that was just already included. I already covered that in the question that I just answered. The same thing.
Yes.
The illumination appears, one doesn't become attached to it, but one recognizes this is just a byproduct of the strength of contemplation. Again, it's not mine, not I, not myself, and one doesn't become attached to it and indulge in it, but one just goes on with one's contemplation.
Yes, I think so. That's answered also. That's all from room 5.
Yeah. Okay, we have about 5 more minutes. So if anybody else has any random questions.
Oh, I have room 6.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
And, the first question is from the Venerable Dipankara. I would like to invite him to ask you directly. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, Venerable Dipankara, could you unmute and ask Bhante your question directly? Venerable Dipankara, are you there? Okay, here you go. Okay.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Bhante, this is a very simple question, just to know about an information.
Yeah.
So I see in Visuddhimagga the 12 links of the dependent origination are separated into past life, present, and the
Yeah,
future.
yeah.
So my question is, Bhante, is there any particular sutta that Buddha has divided the 12 links of the Paticcasamuppada into past, present, and future in
I
its
said,
own words?
yeah, I say not explicitly, but certainly I think that looking at the way these 12 links are explained in the suttas, that the division into the 3 lives is, to my mind, completely convincing.
Because when I think about the vijnana, the Buddha talk about the set of 6 vijnanas, chakku vijnana, sota
Yeah,
vijnana,
yeah.
so on. But I did not find any word like rebirth vijnana or something.
Yeah,
So
one doesn't find the word patisandhi vijnana or patisandhi citta, but there are passages which speak about consciousness as arising in the womb as the beginning of the first existence, or as vijnana as the factor that maintains the continuity of existence from life to life. But in any case, in this retreat, I'm not dealing with the 12 links of dependence. If you look at the recordings from last year's retreat, I dealt in detail with dependent origination last year.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so Osman, continue.
Okay. I have another question from Kathy Chan. Could I invite her to on mute and ask her
Yeah.
question directly? Okay, Kathy, go ahead on mute and ask Bhante, please. Kathy?
Okay. Okay, maybe take the third question then.
Hi,
Oh, okay.
thank you, Bodhi.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bande. This is Kathy from Houston.
Ah,
How are you?
all right.
Quick question. I think you probably already answered the question I have. It's number 122 of chapter 20, attachment. When you first saw this attachment due to insight, I find this insight and attachment a little contradicting each other. But then you just mentioned it's unless you're an arahant, then you still have some attachment, right?
Yeah, the attachment.
Or is it because it's a tender knowledge of rise and fall at this point? It's not mature knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's still tender. It's still in the early stage. So that attachment can come to the phenomena that arise in the course of insight contemplation. It's a different type of attachment from attachment to worldly sensual pleasures, but it's a kind of subtle, maybe we call this a spiritual attachment.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bhante, do we have time for one more? Or?
Yeah, we'll take one more question.
Okay, I'd like to invite Hendel Yame to unmute and ask Bhante a question. Hendel Yame, are you there?
Unmute. Oh, okay, Bhante. So I guess I got the answer already, but just to reconfirm, my question was, what is the practice that we need to do to master the 5 aggregates?
I don't understand what's meant by mastering the 5 aggregates.
Yeah, to this morning lesson, there was a sentence say, no mastery to 5 aggregates cannot control the arising of the phenomena. So how can we train ourselves to master these 5 aggregates?
Yeah, no, what's meant by no mastery of the 5 aggregates, this is something which is, there's no remedy for this. What's meant is that one is not able to exert absolute control over the 5 aggregates so that one could bend them to one's desire. So this is what one finds in the second discourse of the Buddha, where he says that we don't have the ability in regard to form, feeling, perception, volitions, or consciousness to say, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. Like I want to be young forever, but I can't master my form so that I remain young forever. I want to experience only blissful and pleasant feelings, but I experience also painful and boring feelings. I want to see only beautiful things, but I see things which are ugly, disturbing. So I don't have control, that mastery over perception. I want to be able to accomplish whatever I want, but I don't have that ability. So we don't have this utter mastery over the five aggregates. And there's no way to achieve that mastery. It's just the nature of the five aggregates that they're not subject to absolute control. Of course, we can gain a certain mastery over the mind, and that's the whole point of the Buddha's teaching. But we gain the mastery of the mind by overcoming ignorance and the other defilements. But we can't change the nature of the five aggregates from the inevitable fate of growing old, falling sick, and dying. Yeah, so that's what is meant.
I
Thank
guess,
you.
yeah, thank you, Bante. I guess only until once achieve arahantship, then this five aggregate is no longer in an issue.
Yeah, but even the Arhat doesn't have mastery over even the Buddha doesn't have mastery over the five aggregates in that sense. Even the Buddha has grown old. He fell sick from time to time. He was wounded and injured. He felt pain, hunger, and then he died. He passed away. So in that sense, there's no mastery over the five aggregates.
Okay, Bante, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's take a 7-minute break. So we can come back, and an 8-minute break. 3:12 we'll resume. Okay, we still have 2 more minutes.
When we can't hear you.
Okay, we are ready to resume. Okay, so this is the afternoon session, the session at 3:10 on Sunday, September 6th. And okay. Okay, do you see the text now?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, so now we come to chapter 21 and the next purification. This is purification by knowledge and vision of the way. So now we've cleared all of the hurdles, and now we're on the straight course of practice leading to the breakthrough. And so now the text tells us now insight reaches its culmination with the 8 knowledges, in a knowledge and conformity with the truth is the 9th. So that is what is called purification by knowledge and vision of the way. And so we could see that the 8 knowledges begin with the knowledge of contemplation of rise and fall, which has gotten through and overcome the corruptions or the imperfections of insight. And now that knowledge of rise and fall is steady on its course. And so now I have to make another amendment to my table because the position of the mature knowledge of rise and fall, it's a little ambiguous. So I see from this that we should bring it back to where I had it previously. put it under purification by knowledge and vision of the way. Okay, so we start here now with knowledge of rise and fall, which has now gotten free from the imperfections, from the corruptions. Okay, so why does he again pursue knowledge of rise and fall? To observe the three characteristics. Okay, so previously it says the knowledge of rise and fall was not capable of observing the three characteristics in their true nature. Of course, one is observing them, but it was not the knowledge, the contemplation was not sharp and clear enough. But once you get through the corruptions of insight, then the three characteristics become very clear, very evident, very distinctive. Okay, again, this is repeating the sort of the definitions of, or the explanations of the three characteristics. So the characteristic of impermanence is rise and fall and change, or mode alteration, or in other words, non-existence after having been. In other words, a phenomena comes into existence and then it goes out of existence. So it doesn't continue in some form, but it arises, persists for a brief moment, then perishes and it's gone. So that is the nature of rise and fall, or I would say arising and vanishing. And that is the mark of impermanence. Then the five aggregates are dukkha, because of the words whatever is impermanent is dukkha. And why is that? Because of a sense of continuous oppression. So whatever is impermanent is continuously oppressed by arising and vanishing. And then this, and that's again, it's applying to the five aggregates. The five aggregates are dukkha because of that. And then the same five aggregates are not self, because of the words what is painful is not self. And why? Because there is no exercising of power or mastery over them. And this mode of being insusceptible to the exercise of power or mastery, that is the characteristic of not self. Yeah, so as I explained just before, the five aggregates are said to be not susceptible to the exercise of mastery, because one cannot control them simply with an act of will. Like if you want to keep the body healthy, you have to eat the appropriate food, get the appropriate exercise. You have to rely on certain conditions. You can't just form the wish, may my body remain healthy, and it will remain healthy. And there's no way to stop growing old and dying. So the meditator observes all of this in its true nature with the knowledge of the contemplation of rise and fall. So one is seeing, actually one doesn't really, when one is in the advanced or mature stage of rise and fall, one is not actually going through this conceptual elaboration of this is impermanent because it ceases to exist after having been. It's dukkha because of oppression by rise and fall. It's not self because of there's no power over them, but one is just observing the constant arising and passing of the phenomena. And as I said, explained in the morning, as the mindfulness and concentration become increasingly stronger, one starts to see the arising and passing of phenomena at increasingly subtler levels. So at level 1, It seems phenomena are arising, persisting a little while, then passing away. But when you come to level 2, you see that within that what seems to be the persistence of level 1, there's a subtler level in which things are arising and passing, arising, persisting, and passing. And then at level 3, that very brief moment of persistence of level 2 conceals within itself subtler levels of arising and passing, arising and passing. So I sometimes had designated these 3 levels: the molecular level, that would be level 1, where you're seeing arising and passing in a somewhat coarse way. Then from the molecular level, you come down to the atomic level, level 2, where things are arising and passing more rapidly. Then you come to level 3, where things are just arising and passing. So it seems that in the snap of a finger, things are arising and passing dozens of times. I call that the subatomic level of perceiving, arising and passing away. The things are just, this is what I meant by the flashing in and out of existence. It occurs so rapidly that you can't even designate it arising and passing away. But when it's just observing this flashing in and flashing out, flashing in and out, flashing in and out. And then when it's going through each of the 5 aggregates, usually it becomes clearer with the material aggregate. But from the materiality, then one turns to observe the feeling, and one sees the feelings are constantly arising and breaking up, arising and passing away, arising and passing. Then one can turn, let me contemplate perception. And one sees perceptions arising and passing, arising and passing. Then the volitions, and then the consciousness itself, the awareness of this is arising and passing, arising and passing. And so one is observing the arising and passing at very, very rapid at a very, very rapid rate. Okay, so when he repeatedly observes in this way and examines and investigates the material and material states to see that they're impermanent, painful, and not self, then if his knowledge works keenly, formations quickly become apparent. Okay, now this is the important point now. Once his knowledge works keenly and formations quickly become apparent, one no longer extends the mindfulness to their arising or presence or occurrence or sign, but one attends only to their cessation, to their destruction, fall, and breakup. Actually, the text here speaks as if one does this voluntarily, that one makes a deliberate effort to pay attention only to the destruction, fall, and breakup. But what actually happens is that just when the mindfulness and the knowledge and the concentration become very strong, then sort of spontaneously, what stands out is just the destruction, vanishing and perishing of the phenomena, and the arising sort of falls away or into the background. And so when insight knowledge has arisen in this way, so that he sees how the field of formations having arisen thus, ceases thus, this is called contemplation of dissolution. Yeah, the Pali word here is bhanga, which is maybe can also be translated breakup. And then he quotes the Patisambhidhamma here and says, understanding of contemplation of dissolution after reflecting on an object. How is this knowledge of insight? And this is extremely important point. Consciousness with materiality, with some material form as object, arises and dissolves. Having reflected or observed that object, he contemplates the dissolution of that consciousness. Okay, so what is meant here? So in the stage of knowledge of dissolution, okay, there's two things that are being contemplated. The object itself, which usually it's a material object. For example, one might be observing the arising and falling movement of the abdomen. And within that arising and falling movement of the abdomen, say within the arising movement of the abdomen, there are many, many, like thousands and thousands of little movements of rising taking place. And one is no longer seeing even the arising of those movements, but one is just seeing the material form of the abdomen with each expansion, each degree of expansion of the abdomen. One is just seeing the falling away or dissolution of the material phenomena. So in this way, one is contemplating dissolution, but it's a consciousness that is observing that. And so what one does is repeatedly, for some time, one will be observing the dissolution, the passing, the vanishing of the material phenomena, but then one will turn back. One turns the beam of attention back upon the consciousness or the mind, the citta that is doing the observation, and one sees that the citta, the mind, is also breaking up, dissolving, and passing away. Because otherwise, one gets the impression, as one is observing the passing away, the dissolution of material phenomena, one gets the impression that there is some kind of lasting, stable mind or consciousness which remains the same, which remains steady and persistent, that is doing the observation. So it seems that the objects of observation are dissolving and perishing, but the observer remains constant and steady. But for the contemplation to be thorough, one has to turn back upon the so-called observer and see that the observer is just a process of momentary acts of observation, of knowing, of contemplation, and that each of those moments of observation or each of those acts of observation is momentary, just occurring and passing, occurring and passing. And so the mind is sort of oscillating back and forth between contemplating the breakup of the material object, then the breakup of the observing consciousness, then back the breakup of the material object, breakup of the consciousness, and going very, very rapidly between the two. And this can be applied to all of the different objects of contemplation. It's easiest done with the material object. So here we have some explanation. So having reflected on that object, having reflected, having known the object consisting of a material object, and seeing that that object is subject to destruction and perishing, then he contemplates the dissolution of that consciousness. So by means of a subsequent citta, a subsequent act of consciousness, one contemplates the dissolution of that citta, that act of consciousness that with which the object consisting of materiality was seen as liable to destruction and fall. So first one sees the dissolution of the material object, then one sees that the consciousness, the citta, that was observing the breakup of the material object, that citta as well also was subject to destruction and perishing. So the ancient teachers say he sees with insight both the known, that is the object of observation, and the knowledge, the subject that is performing the act of observation. Okay, then it goes on to say that dissolution is the culminating point of impermanence. Yeah, so in a general way, we say impermanence means things are subject to arising, then they persist, then they perish. But what really underlies the truth or the fact of impermanence is that event of perishing, of dissolution. And so the meditator contemplating dissolution, when one is observing all of the objects of awareness dissolving and perishing, then one is contemplating the whole field of formations, of conditioned things as impermanent, not as permanent. And then because all of whatever is impermanent is said to be dukkha, then one is contemplates the whole field of conditioned phenomena as dukkha, not as pleasant, and what is impermanent and subject to suffering, one doesn't take as self, and so one contemplates it all as not self, not as self. Some of the details we can pass over. Yeah, this is what I wanted. Yeah, so these are some similes which illustrate that contemplation of dissolution. So we'll pick up from here. So then he, that's the meditator, disregards the arising presence, occurrence, and sign of all formations which keep on breaking up like fragile pottery being smashed, like fine dust being dispersed, like sesame seeds being roasted, and he sees only their breakup. So this is just like a man standing on the bank of a pond or a river. During a heavy rainfall, he sees bubbles appearing on the surface of the water, and as soon as the bubble appears, it breaks up. And so the meditator sees how formations break up all the time. And so now the meditator, okay, now we pass on to the next knowledge, which is called knowledge of appearance as terror, or I would prefer maybe as fearful. Okay, now the description gets a bit picturesque as well. So as he repeats, develops, and cultivates in this way, the contemplation of dissolution, that is the destruction, fall, and breakup of all formations, all conditioned things, then all formations, wherever they might be, appear to him in the form of a great terror or great fear, as lions, tigers, leopards, bears, hyenas, evil spirits, and so on, appear to a timid man who wants to live in peace. So when he sees how past formations have ceased, present ones are ceasing, and those to be generated in the future will cease in just the same way, then what is called knowledge of appearance as terror or as fearful arises in him. And then this is an important point, because you might think that this knowledge of appearance as terror or as fearful, that when you're in this stage, you're full of fear and terror. But no, that's not actually the case. It's not that you are experiencing fear and terror, but what you're seeing is that the entire field of conditioned phenomena is undependable, insecure, not a basis for security, not that there's nothing reliable here, nothing dependable, nothing invulnerable. And so here he raises the question, does the knowledge of appearance as terror itself fear, or does it not fear? And then the answer is, it does not fear. So when it's not inwardly experiencing subjective fear in this stage, but rather one is seeing that all conditioned things, because they're constantly breaking up and dissolving and perishing and vanishing, that there's nothing to rely upon here. So this is simply the mere judgment that past formations have seized, present ones are seizing, and future ones will seize. So just as a man with good eyes looking at 3 charcoal pits at a city gate is not himself afraid, but he only forms the judgment that anyone who falls into them will suffer pain. And so the knowledge of appearance as terror does not itself fear, but it just forms the judgment that in the 3 realms of existence, that the 3 realms of existence are like 3 charcoal pits in which all conditioned things, past, present, and future, are subject to cessation, to breaking up, vanishing, and disappearing. And so it is called appearance as terror only because formations in all kinds of becoming, generation, destiny, station, or abode, that means in all the different realms of existence, that all these formations are fearful in the sense that they are bound for destruction. And so they appear to be a terror or a source of fear. I should just mention this word that's translated formations. This again is the Pali word sankhara, and here it's being used in the most general sense to refer to all conditioned phenomena, everything produced through causes and conditions. So in other words, the sankhara formations in this sense comprise all 5 aggregates. Okay, so this is now knowledge of appearance as terror. And now we come to the next knowledge, which is called the knowledge of danger. In Pali, this is adinava jnana. Okay, so the text tells us, as he repeats, develops, and cultivates the knowledge of appearance as terror, he finds no asylum, no shelter, no place to go to, no refuge in any state of existence. So in all the different states or realms of existence, there is not a single formation, a single conditioned thing that one can place one's hopes upon or hold on to. Because everything, all the formations, one is seeing them all just breaking up and dissolving. That's in one's immediate experience. One sees this constant breakup and dissolution in one's own bodily and mental processes. And one knows that out in the world at large, everything and every person is just a an assemblage of these 5 aggregates that are always, in their case, breaking up and dissolving, breaking up and dissolving. And when sends the mind through all of the different realms of existence in imagination, unless one has the divine eye, but even the highest heavens and the devas, the deities in the highest heavens, all are just constantly subject to, from moment to moment, breaking up and vanishing, breaking up and vanishing. So there's no stability there, no persistence, no absolute or ultimate security. And so in this way, the 3 realms of existence appear like charcoal pits full of burning coals. The 4 primary elements are like venomous snakes. The 5 aggregates are like murderers with raised weapons. The 6 sense bases are like an empty village. The 6 outer sense bases are like village raiding robbers. The 7 stations of consciousness, the 9 abodes of beings, appear as if burning, blazing, and glowing with the 11 fires. That's the fire of birth, old age, sickness, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, and then the fires of lust, hatred, and delusion. And so all formations, all conditioned things appear to be a huge mass of dangers without any satisfaction or substance, like a tumor, a disease, a dart, a calamity, and affliction. So in composing this paragraph, he is actually drawing upon various suttas and putting them together. Okay, then comes some elaboration. We don't need. Okay, but now drawing upon the text, as one is looking at the danger in all these states of conditioned phenomena, which are always breaking up, dissolving, and passing away, one begins to get the sort of inferential knowledge that beyond all of this, there is a state of peace and freedom and security, which is the state of non-arising. And this means, in effect, nibbana, nirvana. Okay, so now we come to the next insight knowledge. This is called, in Pali, I didn't agree with Yanamoli's translation. He translated knowledge of dispassion, but the Pali expression is nibbida, nibbida jnana. So let me put a little. Yeah, so I find it's more satisfactory to render nibbida as disenchantment. I think we came across this word, was it yesterday? So nibbida, this is when you see into the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of the conditioned phenomena, then one starts to lose interest in them. One becomes, in a sense, disillusioned with them and inwardly turns away from them. So continuing, he says, when he sees all formations in this way as danger, then he becomes disenchanted. He becomes disenchanted towards all of these manifold formations, dissatisfied with them, taking no delight in them, no delight in any kind of realm of existence. And then he compares this, uses a simile, just as a golden swan that loves the foothills of Cheetah Peak, maybe a particular mountain peak, finds delight not in any filthy puddle at the gate of a village of outcasts, but only in the 7 great lakes. So too this meditator swan finds delight not in the manifold of formations seen clearly as danger, but only in the 7 contemplations, because he delights in the development of insight. Or just as the lion, the king of beasts, doesn't find delight when put into a golden cage, but only when it's free to roam in the Himalayan mountains, so too the meditator lion finds delight not in the 3 realms of existence, not even in the happy destinations, but only in the 3 contemplations. I guess that's the contemplation of impermanence, suffering, non-self. And just as this king of elephants called Chedanta, all white and so forth, finds pleasure not in the midst of a town, but only in this lake in the Himalayan mountains, so this meditator elephant finds delight not in any formation, but only in the state of peace, considered in the way beginning non-arising is safety. And so his mind tends, inclines, and leans in that direction. Okay, now we come to an important point, that these 3 knowledges, contemplation of appearance as terror, contemplation of danger, and contemplation of disenchantment, are really different names for basically the same kind of knowledge, or it's the same experienced, contemplative experience, just considered from different angles. And in fact, what is actually taking place at this level, or in these stages of insight knowledge, is really the same as what's taking place in the knowledge of dissolution. So it isn't the case that one comes to some new discovery in these stages, a new discovery that takes one beyond the knowledge of the contemplation of dissolution, or the knowledge of dissolution. But the contemplative experience is actually that of the knowledge of dissolution. One is constantly observing the phenomena of body and mind, breaking up and dissolving, passing away, with, again, with incredible rapidity, almost seeing things down to the subatomic level of the processes. But just occasionally, these reflections will come to mind that all of these conditioned phenomena are fearful, that they are all, and so conditioned existence is full of dangers. But it said that some of the meditation masters say, when one starts reflecting in that way, one should not be led astray by one's reflections, but one lets those reflections come up, and then just notes them and dismisses them and brings the mind back to the contemplation of dissolution, to the breaking up and perishing of phenomena. And then as one is contemplating the constant breakup and dissolving of phenomena, then this disenchantment sets in, this sort of inward turning away from all conditioned phenomena. And one doesn't want to get drawn back in again and again to the cycle of repeated birth and death. And then in this way, now out of the knowledge of disenchantment, now comes the next stage of contemplation, which is called the desire for deliverance or desire for liberation. And so the text says, when owing to this knowledge of disenchantment, the meditator becomes disenchanted with and takes no delight in the whole field of formations. Now his mind no longer sticks fast, cleaves, and fastens onto them. And then the important point, he becomes desirous of being liberated from the whole field of formations, and escaping it. And then this is illustrated again, some quite vivid imagery. It's like a fish that's caught in the net, wants to escape from the net, a frog in the jaw of a snake, a jungle fowl caught in the stage, a deer caught in the snare, an elephant stuck in the bog, and so on, a man encircled by enemies, just as they are desirous of being liberated from their bondage and finding an escape from them, so the meditator's mind is desirous of being delivered from the whole field of formations and escaping from it. And so in this way, then the knowledge of desire for liberation arises in him. Of course, earlier, when one undertakes the practice of insight meditation, one does so from a desire for liberation, but one hasn't yet really deeply and clearly understood what one wants to be liberated from. But now one is seeing how this whole field of conditioned phenomena that we call life and existence is just constantly, everything is from moment to moment at the most personal and intimate level, just breaking up and dissolving and perishing. Now, and one sees that there's no final happiness to be found, no final satisfaction to be found within the realms of existence. Even getting reborn into the Brahma world, when you're reborn in the Brahma world, you're just, again, a bundle of sankharas, phenomena that are breaking up, dissolving, and perishing. And so now one just seeks the state of non-arising, which is beyond all of these conditioned phenomena. And so then desiring liberation from all of the formations and so on, in order to be delivered from the whole field of formations, okay, the important point, he again goes back and discerns those same formations, ascribing to them the three characteristics, but doing so now from a higher standpoint, the knowledge of contemplation, of reflection. And then the text here will give different ways in which one can consider the three characteristics. We don't have to go into these. You can read them at your leisure. Here introduces a fourth characteristic, that of being a Subha, but better to stick just with the three characteristics. So one sort of goes back, starts going through the five aggregates again, ascribing to them the three characteristics. And so it says, why does he discern them in this way? In order to contrive the means to deliverance, to liberation. And then the text uses a rather complex simile. So it's like a man was thinking to catch a fish. And so he took a fishing net and threw it into the water. He put his hand into the mouth of the net underwater, and he grabbed a snake by the neck. So he was glad, thinking, I have caught a fish. And then he lifted his hand out to sea, and then he saw an object with three marks and realized that this was not the fish, but a snake. And so he was terrified. Then he felt revulsion towards the snake, and he desired to be free from it. And so he had to contrive a means to deliverance. And so he unwrapped the coils of the snake from his hand, starting from the tip of its tail. Then he raised his arm, and when he had weakened the snake by swinging it 2 or 3 times around his head, he threw it away. And then thought, thank goodness I have been freed from the jaws of a huge snake. And so the meditator here goes back and contemplates the 3 characteristics in phenomena in order to strengthen that determination to break free from the bondage of conditioned phenomena. Okay, now we're starting to come to the very end of the series of insight contemplations. But I think at this point, maybe we should pause and then take some questions. And probably we could take the last sections this evening. So I want to open up the floor to questions. I see M. Gomez. Is that Maricela?
Yes, Bhante. Thank you for the teachings. My question is, when you say that the knowledge of dissolution is a contemplation that is experiencing the actual dissolution in that point. Sorry for the background noise.
Just go on, just go on.
Okay,
You could speak. We could hear you above.
You can hear me. Okay. I'm referring to the last part of the lecture when you're speaking about the knowledge of dissolution, which is an actual, it seems like it's an actual reflection in that very moment where one is actually experiencing the dissolution right then and there. And it seems then that that knowledge itself is the escape, as it is the escape right then, because one is experiencing the dissolution right there. It's not anymore conceptual, it's not anymore observing, but it's actually an experience. Is that itself the escape? Connecting it to the snake, seeing the snake, one unwraps it from the arm and gets rid, throws it away, and then is freed of it because one has seen it, experienced it.
Yeah.
I'm bringing those 2 things you said together. Is that an accurate understanding? Thank you.
Well, what I would say is that the knowledge of dissolution, of course, one is observing the dissolution of phenomena, and that observation of dissolution will continue through the rest of the series of insight knowledges. But itself, it's not yet the escape. The escape, what we would call the escape or the liberation. The liberation will come when out of the higher stages of insight knowledge, the mind rises up above the level of mundane phenomena and then penetrates into nibbana, which is the unconditioned. And that will be then the supermundane or the world transcending path. So the knowledge of dissolution is, you say, part of the process of reaching the liberation, but the actual sort of direct entry to liberation will be the supramundane path. We'll come to that in the evening session. Okay, we go to Ed now. You can unmute. Ed?
He's got it down here. Okay, Bhante, thank you very much. This has actually been quite interesting and maybe even revealing. I have two related sorts of questions. It struck me that some of this explains the, I guess the transcendental dependent arising. I guess it's in the Upanishad Sutta maybe.
Yeah.
You even wrote a nice little tract on it.
Yeah.
And that's, I've always questioned everything that's going up in the Upanishad Sutta. It seems to me that this kind of explains it in a little more detail. That's number one. And related to it is.
Yeah, well, let me just comment on that first.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, these series of insight knowledges are, let us say, presenting in at finer levels and in much greater detail what's indicated in the Upanishad Sutta just by the designation of those stages. Like there's okay, out of samadhi, there arises what's called yata bhuta jnana dasana, the knowledge and vision of things as they really are. So that would include the mature knowledge of rise and fall, knowledge of dissolution, and perhaps the knowledge of appearance as fearful, knowledge of terror. Then from knowledge and vision of things as they really are comes nibbida or disenchantment. So that corresponds to the knowledge of disenchantment. And then from nibbida, then if I remember, one comes to viraga. Yeah, we haven't yet come to the counterpart of viraga. That will be the supramundane attainment. Yeah, so there is a correspondence. Okay, continue then.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Bhante. The other thing is that when I viewed these as sankhara to a certain extent, there are certain depths into our psyche or our consciousness of sankhara. Some are pretty more superficial than others in the terms of habits and beliefs and volitional habits. And I've always viewed the asavas and unwholesome roots as being in the deepest reaches of our formations. And they cascade upwards into such things like, formations and hindrances and that sort of stuff, into the more superficial. Now, my point is, if it takes lifetimes to get rid of or to overcome those very deepest ones, I mean, they're impertinent because they'll go away after a while if they're worked upon, and maybe for all beings if they go through enough lifetimes. But it strikes me as coming awful close to permanent in an applied sense for the most of us walking around here in 2020. How do you get rid of the defilements and the asavas if most of the other unwholesome inclinations that we have generally grow from those roots, deep roots?
The only simple answer is by following the path of practice. That's all. Sila, samadhi, panya. That's what's needed.
I could buy that.
Okay. Kenneth?
Yes, Bhante. Bhante, I was looking at, knowledge of dissolution, which is, dissolution of everything, all, but could the mind get attached to, or can it get attached to the arising of phenomena at that point instead? Because they both happen, right? Rising and falling, rising dissolution. Could that happen in this level?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, actually.
That would be the wrong path, right? Because that would have an attachment to it.
Of course, if one becomes attached, then one is sort of deviating from the correct path of contemplation.
Yeah.
But whether it's possible,
because that is there along with the
yeah. Coming back to what Ed, the previous speaker, said, the asavas and the unwholesome roots are very strong. So even somebody in these stages of advanced contemplation can then fall into attachments, whether to the contemplation itself or even attachment to worldly things. So
Right.
that's why one has to be very upamada to be very diligent and heedful
Yes.
in one's contemplation.
Yes. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Nama?
Thank you, Bhante, for taking my question. My question is about the knowledge of dissolution. Does the practitioner experience the dissolution of his 5 aggregates at every moment? Is it a personal experience of dissolution, the knowledge that, is it just knowledge, or is it a personal experience of dissolution of the aggregates moment to moment?
No, it is a personal experience. It's not just the conceptual knowledge, but it's the observation of the factors that make up the 5 aggregates is breaking up and passing away. So usually one begins with the material form, with some bodily phenomena. And as one is observing the bodily phenomena, could be the abdomen rising and falling, or it could be the just sweeping the mind through the body to experience the different bodily sensations. So one sees how the body itself, normally we perceive the body as having some kind of stability, consistency of shape, and so on. But when one enters upon this stage of contemplation, that appearance of stability just falls away, and the body is experienced as a process in which there are events, countless events, always arising and breaking up and falling away. And then one can turn the attention then, after sort of getting a deep experience of the dissolution and breakup in the body, one turns the attention or the mind to the mental act of observation and sees how the citta, the mental act of observation, also is breaking up and dissolving. And then if one has a sharp mindfulness and concentration, one could home in on the individual aggregates. So one could determine, let me contemplate feeling, and then the other aggregates will fall into the background, and one will be seeing how each feeling is arising and breaking up. And then one could turn to perceptions, to the volitions, and then to the consciousness itself. So it's an actual experience of things breaking up and vanishing, not just the conceptual knowledge.
Wouldn't that be very scary, Bhante? And very terror-inducing? Wouldn't you be sweating? I would be sweating if I saw it at that minute level.
But it's actually accompanied by feelings of joy and happiness and bliss.
I see.
But I guess in some people it will induce feelings of fear and terror. But the point that the Visuddhimagga wanted to make in the earlier discussion is that the knowledge is a knowledge that the phenomena are fearful and that they're not a basis for security, but the knowledge itself, or the meditator in that stage, is not fearful. If one becomes fearful, then one is not carrying on the practice in the right way.
I see. Thank you so much, Bhante.
Okay, Kathy.
Bhante?
Yeah.
You mentioned eventually when what stands out is just the destruction of phenomena.
Yeah.
And the arising is just in the background.
Yeah.
I'm curious if it's just you should intentionally direct to the destruction of the phenomena, or it's just going to happen naturally.
It seems it could work either way, depending on the person. the way it's explained in the Visuddhimagga, it says that the meditator should stop attending to the arising and presence and just attend to the breakup and passing away. So the way it's explained in the Visuddhimagga, it's as if one does it intentionally, but some meditators have reported that it just happens naturally, that when the contemplation reaches a certain degree of strength, then the awareness of arising and presence fades into the background and dissolution just becomes prominent on its own.
Thank you.
Okay, Jung. Jung.
Thank you for taking my question. Because you talk about the reason for
Yeah, I'm not getting your voice. Try again.
when you generate this knowledge about tarot, because you can hear me.
Okay, now do it.
My question is because the the reason and the fall, then we realize that the things is not impermanent and non-self, right? Yeah. Then we have this generated tarot. Then I know this is myself is the wrong view, is because non-self, then who is
No, now I lost the voice. I think we'll have to move on to see you. Okay, we'll take you later, Jung. There's something wrong with. Okay, see you.
Yeah. Bhante, this is actually a sutta connection to what we talked about today.
Yeah.
And there is this sutta called Atta Deepa Sutta. And it talks about Tadanga Nibbutthi. Tadanga Nibbutthi. And I was trying to find how you translate it in English, but I was just looking at this Pali Sutta.
Yeah.
There it says essentially the words are viragang, nirodang. This is what the person sees with regard to forms and all five aggregates. Is Tadanga Nibbutthi and Bhanga, are they the same or they're two different things?
I'd have to look at that sutta. It's not fresh in my mind now.
No problem.
Okay. Okay. Shan Jung Basher.
Thank you, Bhante. I just wanted to clarify if my understanding is correct. So it seems to me that the knowledge of rise and fall, the knowledge of dissolution, and the knowledge of reflection really require the meditator to discern on the rise and fall, to discern on the delusion, and to reflect on the three universal characteristics.
Yeah.
Other knowledge, from knowledge of fearfulness to knowledge of desire for liberation, they are naturally arising in a meditator's wisdom, as long as the meditator keep practice. And is that correct? That these other knowledges, they don't really require certain specific practice?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not that those are additional like practices or additional contemplations that one deliberately undertakes, but these are just ways of elaborating and expanding upon the way things start to appear when one enters into the knowledge of dissolution. So we could say that the knowledge of appearance as fearful, the knowledge of danger, the knowledge of a disenchantment, the knowledge of desire for liberation, those are in a sense just extensions of the knowledge of dissolution or consequences of the knowledge of dissolution.
Thank you, Bande. I have one more question. Maybe it's not very relevant in terms of the knowledge of dissolution. So what in my mind, this is how I understanding. So when the meditator observe dissolution of the object,
yeah.
When we look at the object, it has a lifespan between rise and fall,
yeah.
and the device that we use to look at that object, which is, for example, our eye door and eye consciousness,
yeah.
they all have their own lifespan.
Yeah.
So then we can only really observe the dissolution of the device, the lifespan of the device, because if the lifespan of the device is expired, then the process is terminated. It's not that we are really observing the dissolution of the object. It is that we are limited to the lifespan of our eye door. Is it quite not very relevant to?
Yeah, I wouldn't get entangled in those kinds of thoughts.
I see.
Yeah, those are sort of maybe those are like theoretical reflections. But what is being described here in the Visuddhimagga are the experiences that arise from actual practice. Not trying to connect this to the theory, the Abhidhamma theory of, you know, the objects having the arising and passing and the I having its arising and passing, but just speaking the way things appear in the process of contemplation.
I see. Thank you, Bande.
Yeah. Okay, Allison.
Yes, Bante, I have a question regarding to when you ask about, when you talk about the observer, the
yeah.
consciousness is observing the object.
Yeah.
Then turn around, the consciousness become the observed.
Yeah.
So what is watching the consciousness?
Yeah, that's a good question. Then it's a subsequent citta, a subsequent act of consciousness reflects back on the consciousness that had been observing the object dissolving, and it sees that that act of consciousness was also undergoing has already undergone dissolution. And even while observing the consciousness itself, the citta itself, one sees that the citta is constantly undergoing dissolution. Probably it's occurring at such a rapid rate, a rapid speed, that that it's very hard to distinguish the citta which is doing the observation from the citta which has been seen to pass away. But one sees, as one just persists in observation, one sees that as one turns back on the citta, one sees the citta just coming into being and passing, and then just passing away, moment after moment. And one just keeps on turning back, and one realizes that each citta that did the observation has passed away and been replaced by or followed by another citta that performs an act of observation. Okay, we take Jong. You want to try again?
How about now? Can you hear me?
It's a bit faint. Let me put the headphones on.
Let me try unplug my.
Better? Worse? Now I almost don't get a voice at all.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
That's better. That's better.
Okay. So my question is, so when we notice the tarot, then based on probably impermanent or non-self, right? If non-self, then who is in tarot? So then when you if you achieve the Arahant, they doesn't have terror anymore. That means because they truly realize the non-self.
Yeah.
Not because currently it's probably just you think you know the non-self. I'm not sure my clear my question. Because
I didn't detect the question there.
So because we realize currently you talked about the tarot.
Yeah.
If we know non-self, then who's in tarot? If no self, I didn't know.
I see. Actually, we're going to come to that in the next section of the sutta. I think that might of the Visuddhimagga that might answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
When we come to the section on voidness or emptiness.
Okay.
Okay, Jean Vogren. Jean, let me.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to know if what we have studied, these stages of the path,
Yeah.
are they what you spoke of in the beginning as Vipassana Jnanika?
As the Vipassana Jnanika.
Is this the insight vehicle?
Well, these are the stages of insight knowledge that will become available to both kinds of practitioners, both the Samatha Jnanika and the Vipassana Jnanika will, when they come to the stage of developing the insight knowledges, they will come to these knowledges.
I see. So, but if you are doing, practicing Vipassana Jnanika, if that's your chosen way, would you be starting through this process sooner?
Sooner than the Samatha Jnanika?
Yes. I mean, would you, at what point do you start practicing in this way? This whole series of stages? Right from the beginning? As soon as you get some kind of strength in your, your object meditation?
Yeah, it's not so much that there is really a choice about where one enters upon these stages of insight knowledge. It depends, like some practitioners can go on for long, long periods without entering into these insight knowledges at all because their faculties are not yet mature enough to enter upon them. Whereas others can almost just begin meditation and then very quickly they go into these insight knowledges.
Yes.
Everything depends on the faculties and the degree of maturity in the practitioner.
Yeah. But what about practicing just with the aggregates and with the elements, those basic things?
Yeah.
You can start those fairly early.
Yeah.
I mean, not early in one's practice, but if one's been practicing a long time and wants to make more progress, one could just go into that.
Yeah, one can. But generally to go into these
the higher knowledges, I know, will take
to get into the insight knowledges, at least from the experience of most meditators, it takes an extended long-term retreat situation to go into them.
Okay.
So if one is doing like daily practice, like an hour in the morning, hour in the evening, and so on, unless one has very strong faculties, it's very difficult to get into these.
I see.
Like what I've heard about people who practice, say, in the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, they say you need like 6 to 8 weeks of constant practice for these insight knowledges to start to arise.
I see.
I've heard of some people who have practiced like 6 months constantly and don't get the insight knowledges. And maybe it's not the case that everybody goes through all of these individual insight knowledges. I would say that this is a finer or more detailed elaboration of experiences that might occur in more subtle ways without being as precisely and fleshed out in detail as in this account in the Visuddhimagga.
I see. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I see you have your hand raised.
Bhante, this is actually coming from the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
A person wanted to ask, since we have a few minutes, would you take it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so she asked, actually, you know, the first line is, will you please be my voice? But she's actually asking for a clarification. All the explanation, so I'm reading to you verbatim. All the explanation about mental, material, volition boils down to extinguish attachment to an aggregate, exit suffering. Did she understand it correctly?
So extinguish attachment to
aggregates, and exit suffering. I guess get out of suffering.
Yeah, one could put it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there was any more questions, I think we could take one or two more questions before the break. Okay, I see. Unil Pereira.
Thank you, Bhante. Can I ask a simple question from the very beginning?
You could ask it, yeah.
So we talked about the three stages, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna.
Yeah.
Then I think yesterday you were saying that as a layperson, Sila can be 5 or 8 precepts.
Yeah.
And if I think along that line, can I think Samadhi as being in the present moment and some meditation, and Prajna as believing in Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path? And if that is correct, I have also heard that for the liberation, you need to have the Prajna and Shraddha both develop same level. So is the Shraddha is believing in the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path?
Maybe can you state the question simply and precisely? And if there are several questions, state each question in turn.
Yeah, so the three stages, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna.
Okay.
And I think yesterday you said for a layperson, Sila can be the observing 8 precepts.
I said that would be for a layperson, that could be considered the higher Sila. Yeah.
Okay, or five precepts as a basic Sila.
Yeah, yeah.
So then my question is, what is the basic Samadhi and Prajna? So I was thinking basic Samadhi is being in the present moment and maybe meditation, Vipassana or Samatha. And
no. I mean, living in the present moment, of course, it's good, but you can't say that is Samadhi. Samadhi means the unification of the mind, the one-pointed focusing of the mind upon its object. So living in the present moment, of course, can be conducive to Samadhi, in that you're not letting the mind drift too much with memories of the past, expectations of the future. But the Samadhi itself is the focusing, the one-pointed focusing of the mind. Okay, and then you said about Prajna?
Yes. So I thought basic Prajna, what is basic layperson Prajna means in that case?
There's not a distinction of Prajna for lay people and Prajna for monks, but Prajna is the same for everybody. And it would be the Prajna of, well, you could say maybe at a very elementary level, Prajna would be the ability to make distinctions between what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, what is good, what is bad. That would be a very elementary kind of Prajna. But the That's not yet the panya that leads to liberation. The panya that leads to liberation will be the understanding of the three characteristics of existence: dependent origination and the Four Noble Truths. Though there are different, let's say, different types of panya that are mentioned. Sometimes it's mentioned the panya that comes through hearing or studying the Dharma. So in that sense, one is getting just the conceptual understanding imparted by others. Then the panya that comes from reflection, from thinking about the Dhammas, from the Dhamma. So this is still a conceptual panya, a conceptual understanding. And then there's the bhavana maya panya. This is the wisdom that comes from meditative development. So in the sequence of sila, samadhi, panya, vimutti, what is meant by the wisdom there, the panya, is the bhavana maya panya, the wisdom that comes from meditative development.
So along this line, what is Shraddha?
Yeah, well, Shraddha is what we translate as faith, but that is sort of at the starting point of undertaking the practice of sila, samadhi, panya. So it doesn't fit explicitly into that scheme, but it's the sort of the starting point for embarking on the path. That would be trusting, confidence, or faith in the Buddha as the fully enlightened teacher, faith in the truth of his teaching, and faith in the liberating capacity of the path.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, we'll take a break now. I'll take the break. So this is from 4:30. Then at 4:40, you come back, you take a little break, 10-minute break, and then come back at 4:40 for chanting and meditation, which will be led by Bhante Mangala. Okay, so thank you all for your attention. And we come back at 7 p.m. to consider the culmination of the path.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, so I will leave.
You there, Stephen?
Yes, Bhante, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. What time did Bhante say we should start?
4:40.
Okay, so we'll start. Okay.
Okay, Bhante. Your camera is off. Perhaps it's intentional. I'm not sure.
Okay. How's that?
Well, I can't see it, but perhaps others can. I'm not sure.
If Stephen and Bhante, I can see Bhante.
Okay, great.
Cool. All right. But okay. So good evening, everybody. As we did yesterday, I was asked to lead the evening service. and lead in period of meditation. So as always, I'll be muting everybody just to make things more simple. And Stephen has volunteered to be my respondent. So unmute Stephen. Okay, you're unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So we'll begin with the Pali verses. So as always, put your hands up in Anjali. And if you have an image of the Buddha in front of you, or if you don't have a Buddha image in front of you, you can visualize it in your mind and bow 3 times. And as always, I always strongly encourage everyone to recite at home, even if you don't know Pali very well. Just kind of read along, give it a try. You know, that's the only way you can really practice, is just by doing it. So, and also listen to myself and Stephen as well. So, hands in Anjali at the heart, and let's begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
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 Beautiful. Okay, now homage to the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava araham.
Iti piso bhagava arahang.
Samma sambuddho.
Samma sambuddho.
Vija charana sampanno.
Vija charana sampanno.
Sugato lokavidu.
Sugato lokavidu.
Anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati.
Anuttaro purisa dhammasarati.
Sata deva manusanam.
Sata deva manusanam.
Buddho bhagavati.
Buddho bhagavati.
Namo tassa samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa samma sambuddhassa.
Ye cha buddha atita cha.
Ye cha buddha atita cha.
Ye cha buddha anagata.
Ye cha buddha anagata.
Pachupanna cha ye buddha.
Pachupanna cha ye buddha.
Ahang vandami sabada.
Ahang vandami sabbada.
Nati me saranang anyam.
Nati me saranang anyang.
Buddho me saranang param.
Buddho me saranang parang.
Etena satchavajena.
Etena satchavajena.
Hotu me jaya mangalam.
Hotu me jaya mangalang.
Uttamangena vandeham.
Uttamangena vandehang.
Padapang suvaruttamam.
Padapang suvaruttamang.
Buddheyo kalito doso.
Buddheyo kalito doso.
Buddho kamatu tamamam.
Buddho kamatu tangmarang.
Buddhang yavani bana paryantam.
Buddhang yava nibbana parayantang.
Saranang gacchami.
Saranang gacchami.
Okay, homage to the Dhamma. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo.
Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo.
Sanditiko Akaliko.
Sanditiko Akaliko.
Ehipasiko Panayiko.
Ehipassiko Upanayiko.
Pachatang Veditabo.
Pachatang Veditabo.
Vinyuhiti.
Vinyuhiti.
Namo tassa niyanikassa dhammassa.
Namo tassa niyanikassa dhammassa.
Yecha dhamma atitacha.
Yecha dhamma atitacha.
Yecha dhamma anagata.
Yecha dhamma anagata.
Pachupanna cha ye dhamma.
Pachupanna cha ye dhamma.
Aham vandami sabada.
Ahang vandami sabbada.
Nati me saranang anyam.
Nati me saranang anyang.
Dhammo me saranang varam.
Dhammo me saranang varang.
Etena sacha vajena.
Etena satchavajena.
Hotu me jaya mangalam.
Hotu me jaya mangalang.
Uttamangena vandeham.
Uttamangena vandehang.
Dhammam chatividang varam.
Dhammang cha tividang varang.
Dhamme yo kalito doso.
Dhamme yo kalito doso.
Dhammo kamatuttam mamam.
Dhammo kamatutang marang.
Dhammang yavani vana pariyantam.
Dhammang yavani bana pariyantang.
Saranang gacchami.
Saranang gacchami.
Homage to the Sangha. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Samicipatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Samichi patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho.
Nyadidam chattari purisa yugani.
Yadidang chattari purisa yugani.
Atta purisa pugala.
Atta purisa pugala.
Esa bhagavato savaka sangho.
Esa bhagavato savaka sangho.
Ahuneyo pahuneyo.
Ahuneyo pahuneyo.
Dakineyo anjali karaniyo.
Dakineyo anjali karaniyo.
Anuttarang punya ketang lokasati.
Anuttarang punya ketang lokasati.
Namo tassa atta arya pugala mahasanghasa.
Namo tassa atta arya pugala mahasanghasa.
Yecha sangha atitacha.
Yecha sangha atitacha.
Yecha sangha anagata.
Yecha sangha anagata.
Pachupanna cha ye sangha.
Pachupanna cha ye sangha.
Aham vandami sabada.
Ahang vandami sabada.
Nati me saranang anya.
Nati me saranang anyang.
Sango me saranang varam.
Sango me saranang varang.
Etena sacha vajena.
Etena satchavajena.
Hotu me jaya mangalam.
Hotu me jaya mangalang.
Uttamangena vandeham.
Uttamangena vandehang.
Sangancha duviduttamam.
Sangangcha duviduttamang.
Sangeyo kalito doso.
Sangeyo kalito doso.
Sango kamatutam mamam.
Sango kamatutang mamang.
Sangang yavani bana paryantam.
Sangang yavani bana paryantang.
Saranang gacchami.
Saranang gacchami.
Okay, homage to the three symbols. Vandami chetiyam sabbam.
Vandami chetiyang sabbang.
Sabbhatani supatititam.
Sabbatane supatititang.
Saririka dhatu mahabodhim.
Sarika dhatu mahabodhing.
Buddha rupam sakalam sada.
Buddha rupang sakalang sadam.
Imaya dhamma nudhamma patipattiya.
Imaya dhammanu dhamma patipattiya.
Buddhang pujemi.
Buddhang pujemi.
Imaya dhamma nudhamma patipattiya.
Imaya dhammanu dhamma patipattiya.
Dhammang pujemi.
Dhammang pujemi.
Imaya dhamma nudhamma patipattiya.
Imaya dhammanu dhamma patipattiya.
Sanghang pujemi.
Sanghang pujemi.
Okay, so that ends the chanting portion for now. So let's get into our meditation position. As always, no matter how you're sitting, where you're sitting, you want your back fairly straight, with the chest cavity nice and open. You don't want to be slouching. Nice, even breath. Want things to flow naturally, without any form of disruption. You can keep your hands on your lap, on your thighs or your knees. Eyes slightly closed. You don't need to rush to do all these things. You want to take your time to get into a nice, comfortable position. Take your time to ground yourself in your body. You can mentally scan your body from your head, from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes, becoming aware of any tension in the body, just going from section to section, letting go of tension in the forehead, in the jaw, back of the neck, shoulder blades, right arm, left arm, chest, abdomen. Letting your mindfulness melt it away. Work your way down each of your fingers. Work your way down your legs, each of your toes. Feel the body pressing against the ground or the chair you're sitting on, or the couch. Feeling the weight of it against the floor, or the cushions. Feeling the pressure, feeling the warmth. Feeling the hands on the lap, heat, softness, the roughness. Maybe respiration. Rising, falling of the chest and the abdomen. So just remember, the goal is not to make these things up or cause these things to happen. The goal is to become naturally aware of them, see them just as they are, see what's actually going on, what's really happening in the present moment. not to pretend or make believe things. Just to observe and watch, become aware of the calm mind, the concentrated mind, an observing mind. One way we can help ourselves be able to observe things. Pick a primary object, like the breath. This is our home base, a base of operations, where we can watch and observe all different activities that are going on around us and within us. Where we can go back to when we get scattered, get confused, get drawn away. So let's become familiar with the breathing process, the natural breathing process. Remember, we're not trying to manipulate or change the breath. There's no need to make it longer. There's no need to make it shorter. Just observing and watching, seeing how it rises, how it falls away. Inhale, exhale, long, short. Put your attention to the tip of the nose, or the upper lip. Place it on the abdomen or the chest. When you breathe in, just be aware of the in-breath. When you breathe out, be aware of the out-breath. When you breathe in long, just breathing in long. When you breathing out long, breathing out long. the mind gets pulled away to any kinds of distractions, external sounds, or painful feelings in the body, like in the knees or the back, or even pleasant feelings, like a cool breeze, or pleasant, calming feeling in the body. Remember, don't get caught up in it and attached to it, or get angry about it, frustrated. These unpleasant sensations and sounds and experiences arise. They happen. Same thing with the pleasant ones. They just happen. Just be aware that these things have arisen. Get caught up in them, to get worked up about them. Doesn't help us in our practice. Just being aware that they have arisen. This is what's going on right now. Watching, observing, instead of judging and attaching. You just let them go. Return back to the breathing. Rising and falling. In breath, out breath. We get distracted by thoughts, memories, planning, just daydreaming, thoughts of wanting, thoughts of not wanting, regrets, anger, bad memories. You just treat them as we would treat any other experience. These have arisen. This is what it is. It's a memory, planning, daydreaming. So what's going on right now? No need to judge it, no need to get caught up in it. Just acknowledge that it's arisen, see it, you know what it is, and let it go. If you don't feed into it, they usually just fall right away. They fall back into the void, back into our mind. Let's go back to the breathing, rising, falling. So whether it's physical sensations in the body, mental activity in the mind, they'll have the same kind of nature. Just like the breath, they rise, they stay for a while, they go away. If you let them, some stay longer, some stay shorter. You usually follow the same kind of routine. So there's no need to get caught up in them. You need to hold on to them. Just watch and observe. Acknowledge them. And let them pass away. Let them follow their nature. Okay, when you're ready, you can slowly open up your eyes. And then rub your palms together and get them nice and twisty. So forehead massage and temple massage. Work your way to the back of your neck and your head. Onto your shoulder blades, upper back and lower back, thighs and the buttocks, knees, calves and shins. You can be sitting on the floor if I want to undo your legs and get your feet. Okay, Stephen, can you post the chanting again, please? Thank you. Okay. Let's do the 3 characteristics today, because we've been talking about anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Let's just You there, Stephen?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, there you go. Sabbe sankara anicchati.
Sabbe sankara anicchati.
Yada panyaya pasati.
Yada panyaya passati.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Esa mago visuddhya.
Esa maggo visuddhya.
Sabbe sankara dukkati.
Sabbe sankara dukkati.
Yada panyaya pasati.
Yada panyaya passati.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Esa mago visuddhya.
Esa maggo visuddhya.
Sabbe dhamma anattati.
Sabbe dhamma anattati.
Yada panyaya pasati.
Yada panyaya passati.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Atta nibindati dukke.
Esa mago visuddhya.
Esa maggo visuddhya.
Okay, now let's extend love and kindness and compassion to all beings. Dukkha pata chani dukkha.
Dukkha pata chani dukkha.
Bhaya pata chani bhaya.
Bhaya pata chani bhaya.
Sukha pata chani soka.
Soka pata chani soka.
Untu sabbe pipanino.
Hontu sabbe pipanino. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining me this evening. So we'll get back together at 7 for the final lecture of this evening. So thank you everyone, and I'll see you all at 7. And thank you, Stephen, for helping out.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
You're most welcome. So see you all at 7.